Hello everybody, it's the Gruppetstudios, and I am back again with another episode of Cartoons vs. Cancer, the show where you ask all kinds of crazy cartoon creators all kinds of crazy questions, and you get all kinds of crazy answers. And it is all, of course, to help raise money for my friend Madeline, who has Ewing sarcoma, a kind of bone marrow cancer. And today's guest is none other than Mr. Chris Savino himself, the creator of the show The Loud House on Nickelodeon. And he's got an IMDb page, like, really long, so he's pretty cool. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
And Chris's lovely assistant, Caitlin, is also with us today, but she's not going to be answering any questions. But she's still lovely assistant. But mine's pretty lovely, too. High five. Woo! And since Chris can't be in the studio today, we've trapped his mind and body in Lincoln himself right here. So if you ask any questions, Lincoln here is going to answer them, but still, Chris's mind and body is in here. And I guess the first question is, along with your really long IMDb page, you kind of started getting into animation with, you started on Ren and Stimpy with John K. And it's my understanding that you didn't you kind of, you had applied, but you kind of just called him up on the phone and were like, hey, can I work on your show, right? Is that how it went down?
It's pretty close. It's not like the same thing when you called me to see if I would do an interview, but, this is back in 1991. It's a long time ago, and it was long before computers or the internet or chat rooms or email. Really, it was snail mail, and something brand new at the time was called a fax machine, where you had to go to a different, I know, right? To a different store specifically to send a fax, and it cost like $1 a page or something crazy like that. But I had just seen the Ren and Stimpy short at the Animation Festival in Detroit, and I had known of John's work on Mighty Mouse and Beanie and Cecil and a couple other music videos that they had done, and was just enamored with what they were doing on Ren and Stimpy, specifically that short. I fell in love with it, but not too much later, I read in a small article on, I think it was in an animation magazine or something, that said, John Kricfalusi, or Nickelodeon picks up John Kricfalusi's Ren and Stimpy the series. They're producing it at their Powerpuff on Melrose in Los Angeles. Like, literally, that's all the blurb said. Yeah. I had to go to the library and look up, Los Angeles phone book, and lo and behold, there was a Spumco actress in there. So I did this thing called writing a letter, and frankly, it was kind of a butt-kissing letter. I was very effusive about John and the people he was working with, the things they had done, that they were what I felt like they were ready to change the face of animation. Coming out of the 1980s, which I have nothing bad to say about 1980s cartoons, but I think what he was doing was bringing something back that was missing. And I did. I wrote him a letter, and I sent him a drawing, and he called me on the telephone. And the telephone, of course, was still hooked to the wall with the cord. Yeah. We didn't even have cordless phones. And he said that he wanted to see some of my sketches, not a final drawing. He wanted to see how I think through my drawings. And that's when I was like, well, I can't wait for the snail mail to get to you. So I went and faxed it to him. I could not wait. And it was like $10 worth that I borrowed from my parents to fax 10 drawings. And he called me 2 days later and said if I wanted to come out, that I would have a job at Spumco. And I couldn't believe it. From a family of 10, and I'd probably be the first person in my family to leave the state. I said, look, can I have like a month to kind of get all my things in order, and then I'll come out? He said, sure. And in April of 1991, I drove out to Los Angeles and started my career, which, until this day, until my dying day, I, thank John for giving me that chance.
And so when Spumco first started, for those out there who don't know, Spumco, being the company that John K made to do Ren and Stimpy, that was when Nickelodeon was outsourcing the cartoons. They didn't have, everybody doing it in the animation studios. Could you tell us, because John K said a few times that the early days at Spumco were sort of like the Wild West. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working in the supposed Wild West?
That is a good question, and it's gonna expose a little bit about my emotions here. Is growing up in Michigan, I was pretty much the only cartoonist that I knew. I didn't know any of the cartoonists, and in my first 18 years, when everybody comes to you to draw this for them or draw that for them, and they're always telling you how great you are, you kind of start to believe it. Yeah. And so moving out to Los Angeles and thinking that I knew everything about cartoons, and then getting a job with the best cartoonists in the industry and the most seasoned cartoonists in the industry, you know, it was like a slap in the face. I realized I knew absolutely nothing. So all at once, it was the best experience where I could look over these guys' shoulders and see these people drawing like I've never seen somebody draw in person before, but at the same time feel like I absolutely had no talent whatsoever. So I really felt like at that time, I better try and absorb as much as I can from these guys because I feel like I'm not going to be able to keep up. And I should probably start in animation on the ground floor. You know, they were all so experienced and so talented and such excellent cartoonists that there was just no way I could keep up with them. So with that Wild West feel, it was great to see these guys, you know, it's probably an overstatement, rebelling against the way cartoons were being made and trying to prove that you have some movement. Let's make those poses funny. They don't have to be static drawings. And it was great to kind of see them fighting that fight and standing up for what they believed in. And ultimately, it proved to be correct. They were right. It changed everything about animation and how TV animation was made. So it was great to see that happening before my very eyes. And I was only there in that first season for, I think only like 8 months or something like that. But in that time, I feel like I learned the most about cartooning and what it was to make a funny cartoon. And then, of course, over the years, you kind of filter that through your own point of view and your own style, and whatever sticks and whatever comes out from that time becomes you, and you you know, hopefully aren't compared to what other people had done at that time anymore.
That's pretty interesting, actually. And one thing I just gotta know as an animation nerd is John Case says, you know, and there's all kinds of quotes about it, that he encouraged all of his staff and all of his employees to never draw the same position or emotion or face twice on his characters. Did he tell his staff that? Like, do you remember him telling you or some other staffs, don't draw the same face twice?
Not that specifically, but I think he did encourage you to take the storyboard and embellish it in the character layout. You know, there was that difficult line between it being limited animation and you limited the number of poses that you could do in a scene for the animators, and really just having fun with it. You know, the storyboards, of course, were amazing. Bob Camp's, you know, the best cartoonist I know, and just going through his storyboards, I couldn't believe someone could take his board drawing and then be tasked in making it somehow better. Like, it just seemed like, well, it's already fantastic. How can you make it better? But they did, and they made awesome cartoons out of it. But yeah, you know, he encouraged to you know, there were a lot of rules, but he also encouraged people to kind of break those rules too. I mean, but you have to know the rules before you can break them. You can't just break them, and I think that was one thing I learned pretty quick.
And so, if my timeline's correct, you did a few more Nickelodeon shows, and then you and a few little animation guys, you know, Gendy Tartakovsky, you might know him, I don't know, Craig McCracken, Rob Renzetti, who, you know, Cartoon vs. Cancer represent. All these great guys, they come together and they make Dexter's Laboratory and the Powerpuff Girls later. And so you were there for the early days of Nickelodeon getting started and Cartoon Network, right? Right.
You know, early on it was, you know, like you had said at the beginning, that Nickelodeon had kind of outsourced to companies to make their shows, and I think Klasky Csupo was another one making Rugrats. And then Nickelodeon started their own production house called Games Animation, and it was Games for quite a while before it was just Nickelodeon Animation Studios. But in between that, I was on Rocko's Modern Life doing character designs and working with some fantastic people who went on to do amazing things. Least of all, Steve Hillenburg, who went on to make a show called SpongeBob. You know, Mark O'Hare worked there, Robert Skull, Doug Lawrence, Dan and Swampy, who went on to do Phineas and Ferb. It was like that show in particular for Nickelodeon. Not only was a great show, but it was like a breeding ground for people who were going to ultimately do amazing things in animation. So yeah, I learned a lot there in doing character designs. Again, I'm very, very nosy, so I'm always looking over people's shoulders, trying to figure out what part of that job they're doing, and just absorbing it. You know, I was never satisfied with just being the one thing I was hired to do. I wanted to know what everyone else was doing. Probably it bugged a lot of people early on. But, you know, at around that time, near the end of Rocko for me, and near the end of Ren and Stimpy, because I did go back for third and fourth season of Ren and Stimpy, not doing the second season. But, you know, Genndy had done that Dexter short for at CalArts, and when he came out, they did the little pilot for Hanna-Barbera at the time and Fred Seibert. And I think it was already in production when I joined the team. And then, you know, at Rocco, I really wanted to do storyboards, but there were so many great board artists, and there's like no way I'm going to wedge my way in there. They're not going anywhere. So I was able to, you know, I met with Genndy and showed him my work, said I wanted to do storyboards. And I remember freelancing a storyboard for him, and I was going in to pitch it to the crew, nervous as heck.
Yeah.
And I told a production assistant, I was like, you know, I really hope this pitch goes well. I really want to work on this show because I can see that they're really doing some great stuff in TV animation. And she said, I'll never forget, she's like, oh, well, you know, they're all CalArts guys. They only hire CalArts guys, so they're never going to hire you. And I was like, I was devastated. It was just before my pitch, too. I'm like, oh, great. So I pitched it, and it went well. And, you know, a couple days after that, I got a phone call from the line producer on the show and saying that Genndy really liked what I had done. He saw potential in what I had done, and would I like to come on board? And yes, I would. And, you know, I really see that as the beginning of my path into you know, where I am today is having my own show.
Yeah, a lot of things you can see in the earlier Tartakovsky or McCracken cartoons with the thick outlines. A lot of that's translated into your show. You know, there's a lot of thick outlines, even though it's sort of matching a comic book style. It's still sort of there.
Right.
It's sort of like a lot of flat colors, and it looks like, I love how Loud House really looks back like it's harkening. And you'd say, you know, I hate to say old cartoons, but 90s cartoons. That's what 90s Cartoon Network cartoons is what I'm.
Yeah, before you were born.
Yeah, before I was around. Before I could complain that the 90s were better than the 2000s, at least. And speaking of those shows, and I think this is right, when Craig left Powerpuff Girls, or to work on, I think, either the movie or Foster's, he sort of handed the crown down to you, right?
Yeah, he did. And before that, it was Genndy, and you know, it was an amazing honor for Genndy to trust me with Dexter while he was doing Samurai Jack, and it really was my first thing. And you know, there are some people who don't like the work I did on the show. There are some people who thought it was just fine. You know, Genndy was there every step of the way. It wasn't like we ran off to a secret corner and made the show without him. Everything was done with his approval. But you know, we had all worked on this show before, and we all took a break from it to do Powerpuff. And when it came back, a lot of us felt like, well, we don't want to do exactly what we were doing before. It's time to kind of upgrade it a bit, or tweak the design a bit. And you know, coupled with the new art director and Genndy, we kind of came to that style that you see in those later episodes.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think we did a good job. You know, you can't channel somebody. You can't make the kinds of decisions that Genndy would have made. Just as impossible to do that. And in the same way that if I was to stop making Loud House and someone else was to take over, just wouldn't have the same feeling behind it. And something you learn at that point is how much a creator invests him or herself into their show, not just making it, but everything about it exudes the personality of the person who created it. And the same with Powerpuff. You know, I was wrapping up Dexter, and I believe Lauren Faust was running a few early episodes of Powerpuff Girls because Craig was off developing Foster's. And I think that it was just one of those natural transitions where she wanted to transition off and work on Foster's. And I was coming off of Dexter's Lab, and it was perfect timing for me to just take over that. And again, the same thing. My sensibilities are not the same as Craig's. I could not even begin to guess where his thought processes come from and how long he's been living with those characters to kind of make those kinds of decisions. When you're someone on the outside, even though I wasn't technically on the outside, I'd worked on it from day one with him, you still just can never, ever know a person. And in essence, you can't know their cartoon. So we did our best. Again, it was the same team. We had stopped working on Powerpuff Girls for a little while to do other things, and we all felt like, well, it's time to kind of change a little bit of what we wanted to do in the Powerpuff. And here's a great example of it, because some people, you know, they will say, well, why'd you change it? And so during the time of doing Dexter's, I was doing this movie called Flintstones on the Rocks, which was only shown a couple times on Cartoon Network. But if you can find it, I recommend looking at it. Looking back, there's some things I would do differently. But, you know, our pitch was, let's go back to the original design of the Flintstones back from the 60s when it felt more like a sitcom. And I remember Iwo Takamoto, who was, you know, he was there in the Flintstones in the early days. He said, why would you want to do that? We already did it. And that's why the Flintstones changed over the years so much. It's like they wanted to keep reinventing themselves. And that never left me. It always stayed with me. I was like, yeah, I can see why you would want to change things. And not that it was broken, but it's as you kind of revisit these things, it's time to bring something new that hadn't been done to it yet, or change it a bit. And, you know, frankly, perhaps the same way we saw some later Flintstones as not as good as the originals. It wasn't because the people who were making it weren't the original guys, because it was. Same with Dexter's and Powerpuff. It wasn't that the originals were bad in any way. It was, hey, let's try something new here. Yeah. And looking back, some people might say it's crummy, and some people might say it's great. But all in all, all of those experiences lead to where I am now. So I can't say those experiences were bad in any way.
Because it's sort of like you do the same thing over and over again until people complain that it gets stale, or you redo it and people complain that they like the original better. So it's sort of, you gotta weigh your options, I guess, right?
You just boiled down my 20-minute conversation into one sentence, and I applaud you for that. Thank you. I'm gonna use that next time.
But I guess, and don't, if you have strong feelings, don't get too loud about it, I guess. But on the veins of reboots and also shows you've worked on, and also the Powerpuff Girls, do you have any thoughts, or have you seen the new Powerpuff Girls reboot on Cartoon Network this year?
You're putting me on the spot. I haven't seen more episodes than the pilot, or the first airing. I don't know if you want to call it a pilot. Mm-hmm. And I could see what they were doing and why they were doing it. You know, over the years, I mean, this was what, 2000 when Powerpuff Girls kind of wrapped up a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit later. I could see what they were doing. Is like Cartoon Network kind of has a style. It's got a brand. It's got an image now. And you know, the earlier designy Powerpuff Girls was maybe outside of that, and by kind of maybe rounding out the characters a little bit more, or rounding out the world a little bit, it really felt like it was at home with the current Cartoon Network lineup. And I understood that, and I have a lot of friends working on the show, and I think they're super talented. And nobody sets out to make a crummy show. We all set out to make the best show that we can. So I would say the response to the show, critically or visually out there, is polarizing. Some people want it exactly the way it was, and some people are quite happy with it being something different. And a lot of the audience now are kids who grew up long after Powerpuff Girls was finished. Mm-hmm. Yes, they'll see repeats, but it's new to them, which I think is fantastic. But I don't have a huge opinion about it. I say, yeah, if that's what they want to make, awesome. I think that, you know, as far as casting goes, the fact that they chose different girls, I know that there's lots of online discussion about that. I kind of wish they would just pick, if they were going to go for different cast, 100% different cast, because I don't think it's fair to pick a couple and not the rest. It's either all or nothing, I guess. I'm a Libra, so there's no in between. But yeah, I think that I appreciate it, and I hope that I hope it does well. I want all my friends to continue working, and you know, like with anything, what is the phrase? The rising tide raises all ships. So shows that are made and doing well, it only helps us all.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't make a critically strong video about the new Powerpuff Girls. Oh, hey, let's look at the comments immediately. Sergio151 would like to know, do you watch any modern cartoons? And do you have any favorite animes or mangas? There's this really great cartoon out right now called The Loud House, and the creator's a really cool guy. What?
That is a good question. I just don't watch a lot of cartoons the way that I used to watch cartoons. I do look at cartoons to kind of see what's going on out there, see what my friends are working on. The last series that I watched, and that I watched the entire series, was a show called Kappa Mikey. Oh, and I
remember Kappa Mikey.
That's kind of anime. I know it's a little bit making fun of anime a bit, but that show cracked me up, and it felt like an interesting mix between what we were doing on Dexter, the design of it, mixed with some anime. but the writing on that was spectacular. It cracked me up.
I haven't even like thought of Kappa Mikey in like 5 years, and you immediately said it and like just rushed into my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, that was okay. Let's not get into talking about stuff.
We won't talk about how the main title was an earworm as well.
Let's steer away from that category, I guess. And
okay.
So a lot of people, they watch Loud House, and it's the first show and that you've had greenlit, but it's not the first pilot that you've had. You had a show, or a pilot, I guess, back when Cartoon Network was doing a certain block. I think it was called the What a Cartoon block, or was it the What a Cartoon block? With the
That's right.
Yeah, the What a Cartoon block. And what they do is they'd have a whole bunch of creators make pilots for the network, and they'd show them, and the people at home would vote. Shows like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Codename Kids Next Door, probably another one that I'm forgetting that you're going to roast me in the comments for, all came from that program. And Chris made a show, or made a pilot, called Faux Pause. And would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Wow, you did your homework.
Well...
Okay, so the good thing that came out of Faux Pause, and I'll tell you in a minute. So yeah, when we were working at Hanna-Barbera, and it was a period of time, I think it was between Dexter and between Powerpuff Girls, that all of us had a lot of downtime, but they actually kept us working, which was fantastic. And so one of our things was everybody pitched to the What a Cartoon show. And so that was my idea. Faux Pause was about an Italian woman whose kids had all grown up and moved out of the house, and she gets these two animals, a cat and a dog, and kind of forces them to act like humans.
Yeah.
Simple pitch. I did the short, which was fun to do. I worked with some great people, Tom Kinney and Ryan Stiles, and Rhoda Gimignani did the voice of the Italian woman. And it was just a great experience. It was the first time I'd been able to do, from writing all the way to final post-production, something of my own. And so when it came down to the voting, at the time, really, again, no computers. It was a phone call. Like, you actually picked up the phone and called to vote. And I remember getting a phone call from the executives at Cartoon Network saying, look, we only have 3 slots open for this call this year. And I think 12 cartoons or shorts have been made, and we're picking 3. And unfortunately, one of them is not yours. Like, okay, that's okay. And I think at that time it was Billy and Mandy was one of them, or The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy was one of the ones that was going to be for the big pick. And so at that, when I said how it turned into something good, that's when the executive said, look, but the way you made this, and you're professional, and etc. We loved working with you on this short. We want to see if there's anything else you can do. And that's when he said, we have the classic Hanna-Barbera characters in our library. Are there any of those that you want to work with? And I did want to work with the Flintstones, and I suggested maybe rebooting it as a series. And they said, no, we're not doing series, but we are doing movies. And so I quickly switched gears, and with Dave Smith, we came up with that Flintstone movie that you haven't seen yet. It's got an amazing stop motion sequence in it that you should probably check out.
Oh, really? And what's the name of that for anybody wondering out there?
Flintstones on the Rocks.
Flintstones on the Rocks. Maybe a link in the description. Editor. Flintstones on the Rocks. You heard what he said. So I guess we'll finally get into Loud House. Many of the episodes, it's pretty early into its run in terms of what's been aired, at least.
Right.
And so it's sort of early in, at least at the time of this interview. And one thing that I've noticed a lot is that you wrote a lot of the episodes, but you directed a lot of them too. Cartoon directing is something I'm really interested in. And so you've said before in all kinds of interviews that it comes from your love of Saturday morning cartoons. But what I really noticed, I guess, as Mr. sits there and watch what a director does, is the way you set up like a scene is just like a panel in a newspaper. And what I find really interesting is that if you this is a fun exercise, I guess, for Loud House fans. If you were to take the characters and black them out, you can tell what they are from a silhouette, and that's a really interesting style of directing. Is there anywhere that came from?
That's something that I learned on Ren and Stimpy, is that the strength of a silhouette, you should be able to fill in a pose in black and still know what the character is doing. And it didn't start there, but that's where I learned it. That's something that goes way back to any good staging or posing in an illustration or a cartoon, Looney Tunes, etc.
Yeah.
But you know, the idea, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea that it looks like a panel, is that if you took a Sunday Funny and brought it to life, that's what the show should look like.
Yeah, and I guess on the vein of that, do you read the newspapers a lot nowadays, and are there any comics in the Sunday Funnies that you specifically like?
What's a newspaper? I'm kidding. You know, I haven't picked up a newspaper in a long time, but you know, Calvin and Hobbes was a big deal for not only me but a lot of people in the '80s. And then recently, and sadly, the strip has stopped. There was one called Cul-de-sac by Richard Thompson, and I encourage anyone to go out and pick that one up if they can in a reprinted book, because it was, to me, I think that it surpassed Calvin and Hobbes in a lot of ways, and it was a little bit more, you know, edgier to a degree, but something about it that was real.
Yeah.
And you know, I think, of course, it was something that a strip like Calvin and Hobbes paved the way for it. But had the strip not stopped, I think it could have been just as successful, if not more, than Calvin and Hobbes.
In the comments, a name that I'm not even going to try to pronounce asked, did you have any more ideas for other Hanna-Barbera characters, just that you maybe didn't pitch, or just maybe you had in your mind at all?
You mean like the Flintstones, for example?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
It's funny that they would ask. You know, while we were making the Flintstones, we wrote and storyboarded a Quick Draw McGraw movie. Oh, yeah. The storyboard exists somewhere, and you know, it was about that you know, kid-friendly topic of real estate. Oh. And the other one we started writing pitching was a Top Cat movie about literally they get into the mob and become the, you know,
Top Cat, like the little yellow one with the purple hat, right?
Yeah, and Top Cat technically translated into Spanish is Don Gato, so that's what we called it, was Don Gato, and of course the head of a mafia family is called a Don or a Don. So we were kind of connecting all those pieces there, but that never got past a pitch.
I could think of some Hanna-Barbera characters that would be pretty interesting to see in the mob. Maybe like Dick Dastardly with
sure.
with his ride up like horn machine, just going around knocking people off. That'd be great. Actually, one of my favorite Hanna-Barbera reimaginings is on the subject of Wacky Racers. They made some kind of pilot. I think it was like the sons and the daughters of all the Wacky Racer characters, like put into another race. Have you seen that?
This is the first I'm hearing of it. I'm going to look that up when we're done here.
Yeah, that was on, my friend Rebel Taxi made a video on it, something about that. Go look at it. Tell him I sent you. I don't remember what it was. And we are getting, we're getting a good one in the comments, I can tell. The editor's nodding his head, that's how I know it's good. Maggie in the comments would like to know, do you pull off a lot of personal experience? Oh, do you pull a lot of personal experiences? Do you pull a lot of personal experiences into your projects?
Well, like I said earlier, but same with Gendy and same with Craig, is that you kind of can't help it. Experience kind of guides you, and you know, when the Loud House early on was about bunnies. And I didn't think that I was pulling anything from my life into it. But when we made that decision to switch to humans, something happened there. Something clicked where I started to pull it from my life, because like, well, heck, that's kind of me. So yeah, I started bringing more into it. But, you know, it's just little snippets of ideas or experiences, not necessarily an entire story per se, but just a scene or an idea or a joke or a specific happening. And I think what that does is bring a sense of, or I hope it does, is bring a sense of authenticity to the episodes and to the show itself. And of course, you know, when the writers started and the storyboard artists, they had complete freedom to start, you know, bringing stories from their life into the show as well. You know, like when I was a kid, this happened to me, or my sister did that. Like, we should put that in the show. So everyone brings something to the table, and I think across the board that brings a sense of authenticity to the show that more so than I could by myself.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, in Loud House, all kinds of family things happen. And you with 10 siblings should know, even though they're not all girls, I guess. And I guess I'd like to know, because, you know, a lot of the things, like most cartoons, is just a normal thing kind of blown out into proportion. But is there any scene you personally can remember that from Loud House that is like completely something that happened to you, like exactly how it went down?
Nothing yet. You know, we try to disguise them a little bit, but yeah, I remember in second grade, I was kind of a fidgeter and I moved around a lot in my seat. Being short, my feet didn't touch the ground, so I'd sit on my feet a lot. And so I fidgeted my way into my chair to a degree that I got stuck in it. And another teacher had to come from another class with a screwdriver and get me out of the chair in front of the whole class. And it's like, that is my goal, to somehow work that into one of our stories, because it's so personal. And hopefully people watching, like, there's no way you could make that stuff up. That had to happen to somebody.
Well, I guess that's a Gruppetstudios exclusive. If you see that, you heard it here.
Yeah, I haven't told anybody that story yet.
Just one question. How did she remove you from your chair with a screwdriver?
Well, so our chairs were you know, like four-legged chairs with a seat and then two poles that went up and then just a back. So I was in between that chair back and the chair bottom. So they had to come in and take the chair back off.
That's great. Right now in the comments, someone would like to know, because you've said a few times that you read a lot of comic books and stuff. What would you say is your biggest influence at the moment? Maybe books, technology, news, how they sort of blend in to make your show what it is.
Wow. You know, still comics. There's something about it that, you know, growing up, that's what I wanted to do, was do comic strips for the newspapers. And when I got into animation and kind of switched gears, I always had this nagging feeling at the back of my mind that I kind of turned my back on comics. So in a way, you know, the fact that I'm doing this show that has a lot of, you know, comic feel to it, it's kind of forced me to kind of dive into the things that were influencing me in the way that I drew. So I'm rediscovering all these strips that I had just kind of read once and put to the side, and then, you know, introducing the artists and the writers on the show to these strips as well. It forces me to see them again for the very first time, which is great. But, you know, a lot of people will compare to more recent strips some of the things, and I go, well, you know, those artists were influenced by other artists who were probably influenced by other artists, and if you really dig back deep in time, you'll see where the genesis of a lot of these artists came from. Even Calvin and Hobbes, if you look at it, Calvin looks like the really early version of Charlie Brown, like the 1950 version of Charlie Brown, and Hobbes is kind of based on the same shape as Albert the Alligator from Pogo. So you'll see, if you can kind of see those influences. And so my influences went from, you know, Garfield, and then I started digging deeper and found strips like Crazy Cat, and found strips like Polly and Her Pals, and early Dennis the Menace, or even the early Peanuts strips, and kind of started from there. So currently, that's kind of what I'm digging myself into and reading. And of course, having older brothers around, there was always Mad Magazine, and I like to dig back deep in that too, and kind of see that it started off as a comic book back in the early 50s, and even before that, Harvey Kurtzman with the EC comics and his Hey Look strips. You know, just dig back further and look at what modern cartoonists are influenced by, and then become equally influenced myself, and just see that there was again, that was early strips were also the Wild West. They were inventing the modern comic strip, and I like to see those kind of trial and error strips happening at that time.
That's pretty interesting, actually. Someone in the comments, Mr. Recent Times, would like to know, will there ever be, and I hope this isn't a spoiler, will there ever be a musical episode of Loud House, or is that top secret?
Like everybody singing like a rock opera or something?
It says musical, yeah, so I guess whatever, maybe.
I won't say no. I can say we're not making it right now, but I think that that's on a list of things that would be fun to do. I mean, we have Luna, who would be a great kind of impetus for that story. It's just a matter of coming up with the right story, but I think it would be awesome. Yeah. I mean, the talent on the show alone, the voice talent would make it amazing.
And oh, this is okay. So this is one that I kind of want to know, and this is going back to the Ren and Stimpy thing we were talking at the beginning. We'll go back to Loud House, I promise. But
Okay.
Shredder Rad would like to know, and this is like an urban legend around the cartoon world, is that apparently one day at Spumco, Kurt Cobain walks in, and he's like, I have this demo for the Ren and Stimpy song, and someone listened to it, and I think Billy West listened to it, and he's like, this thing would be great, and maybe John or someone didn't want to do it, but is it true that actually happened? Do you know if that happened or not?
I have never heard that, and this is the very first time I've ever heard that idea, but I'm not going to say it's not true because, again, I was only at Ren and Stimpy at Funko for 8 months. They continued for another year and a half or so beyond that into season 2, so it could happen. I'll ask around.
Oh, actually, if you could, because that's one of those like Lost Media Wiki like big articles, so that'd be pretty interesting if you could get. Check my Tumblr. Maybe I'll have an update when something happens like that.
Okay.
Also going on, recent times, asked again, what influenced LuAnn, the character?
Oh, that's me. Puns are, I'm well known for them in the industry. I think people kind of see me as synonymous with making bad jokes, and I own them 100%. I don't ever feel bad for making people groan. But puns in animation, because they get translated into other languages, they don't translate well, and we try to stay away from them. And some people see that as a lower form of comedy. I just say you're jealous that you're not coming up with good puns. But LuAnn 100% was my outlet for that kind of humor, and she is unapologetic as well as I am. And I just wanted to see a little bit of what I think is funny coming through a character. And it's not necessarily the puns that she is making that is what makes her funny. I think it's the unapologetic nature in which she goes at them. She doesn't really care if people don't like them or don't laugh. It's just, this is who I am and this is what I'm laying out there, and she's not looking for someone to give her props or tear her down. Like, this is me, and like that to me is me. Only when it comes to making bad puns.
And so I guess if they're writing like a LuAnn episode and they something happens, will they walk up to you and be like, Chris, make a pun about this piece of wood, and you'd be like, that sure is Woody, and say something like that? Is that how it goes down?
I wouldn't make that joke, no. I'm kidding. Yeah, and they do. They'll come to me like, we're writing this scene with LuAnn, and like, we need a good pun here, and I'll lay out a few for them, and then
you have a few like stashed up like in any scenario?
She would say something like, I'd make a joke about that wood, but it would make me bored. I don't know.
So kind of backpacking off that, Isaac Jones would like to know, if LuAnn represents your goofy side, would you say your other personality traits are spread upon the other Loud girls?
Good question. A lot of people ask if I'm like Lincoln, and he's the most opposite of me, besides Lynn, who's sporty, because I'm not. I guess there's pieces of me in all of them, but less so as you kind of work your way out. I'm not music. I'm not musical.
I'm gonna guess you're not like Lucy.
No, what's weird on the Nickelodeon game online, where you can kind of find out which Loud character you are. I did it 4 times, and every time it was Lucy. So maybe I am. Maybe I'm a little bit more emo than I pretend to be. But when you really kind of boil it down, like it is a piece of all of them. But I think LuAnn stands out as the most me. At the same time, they've all kind of taken on their own personalities, and they've kind of left me. Like, I have nothing in common with them anymore. Like I did at the beginning, that you think about what you know, and you write what you know and write what you experienced. And then suddenly there are 5 or 6 other writers who are bringing that more to the table, and I didn't experience those things. So the characters become more them than they are me, except for LuAnn.
Yeah. And this isn't really a question, and I hope this doesn't sound like me kissing up to you, but what I really like about the characters is a lot of shows like this would just have the character who's the the emo, or the character who plays the guitar, but like there's a lot more to the characters than that, and I love that they really flesh out all these sort of would be one-dimensional things, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to say a lesser show, but in like a lot of other places I've seen.
Well, you know, I'm glad you said that. You know, some people think that the characters are one-dimensional. I know there's topics of conversation online about that, but you know, with 10 sisters, you kind of had to start somewhere, and the notion came from the short, which was only 2.5 minutes long. And it's like, how do I introduce you to all of these characters and make you feel like they each have individual characteristics in this one scene where he's going down the hall? So I had to pick one. And that's kind of where they start. And I think that miraculously, that's how people are able to learn who they are so quickly. And yes, as we've told more episodes and more episodes coming up, we're kind of peeling back the onion skin, and you're going to learn a whole lot more about each of these characters that even when we were developing the pilot, I didn't know existed for these characters, but they are natural evolutions of them that hopefully people will like. You know, even the actor who plays Lori sometimes like, is my character just a bitch all the time? And they're like, no, she's the oldest. And I try to explain, like, when you're the oldest and you've had to deal with 17 years of siblings, you get a certain way. You're frustrated and you feel like you know, laid the groundwork for them to get away with things. Like, you are kind of the boss. And, you know, she's got one foot out the door ready for college. And like, that is a complex character there, but she's also the most scaredy cat character in the house, but she's also at the same time the one who understands Lincoln the most, which, you know, to me, that's not the mean character that you might think she is. She's much more subtle than that.
Maybe I can try to make this really reading into your characters and seeing it as the repression of her family and college and all the stress of life just really bears down on her and makes her that kind of person.
Well, thank you for boiling down my sentences into one again.
I'm good at this. This is a great interview.
You are.
Dab Bunky 618 would like to know, since you've worked in comics, you've done writing, all kinds of fun stuff, do you prefer animation over other types of art to personally express yourself?
Wow. You know, animation is a collaborative experience where you do get to express yourself, but it's a combination of everybody's expression into one thing. Whereas with comics, I can sit at home and write it and draw it and scan it and color it and all those things, and it is just me. And you know, I think most artists will like to have that kind of outlet. And I still do comics at home. I still do the Bigfoot comic that, you know, that I don't produce enough of. And even though I've got an entire series to make and I'm tired when I get home, still that need, that feeling deep down inside of like expressing yourself that is solely yourself. I cannot say anymore that The Loud House is me or my show. It's a we and our show. And with Bigfoot, it's like, this is my strip and this is me, and you get a really good idea of who I am artistically and writer at that time. But yeah, I guess I would prefer. I guess I would say comics over animation, you know, personally. But ultimately, it's come down to a little less drawing and just characters and story. That's the most important thing. So if I'm doing it myself or doing it with a team of people, it's just feeling good about those things.
That's good one, Debunky. That was a really good question. I'm totally going to take the credit for it. That was really good. So this one's a personal one, I guess. I just want to know this because this isn't even really show related. In real life, like in actual outside of YouTube life, I'm good friends with and you probably know who he is, but I'm saying it for the kids at home. Rob Renzetti, the creator of My Life's a Teenage Robot. When we had Rob on the show, I asked him if he had any good stories about Gendy. I'd like to know if you have any good stories about Rob that I could maybe bring up, or maybe not. I don't know.
Oh, man. You know, no, but it's hard to describe here, but he did. I have this book, a utility sketchbook that over the last 16 or so years that I give to fellow artists and say, please draw yourself in here. So it's everybody's caricature of themselves. And Rob's, which I still laugh about to this day, was he did a drawing of himself walking down the street with a satchel, dreaming about another dude walking with a satchel, but much better looking dude.
Yeah.
And to him, he's like, well, that's me, but that's me dreaming I was good looking. But the thing that made me laugh about it was that he scribbled his name, like signed Robert Denney, underneath the real drawing of himself. But up in the thought balloon, even the good-looking guy had a signature of Robert Denney, but that signature was really super nice. And I thought, how meta of this guy to like not only be dreaming that he was better looking, but also dream that he could sign his name better.
Oh, that's
It's not a great story, but it makes
great.
me laugh.
No, that's great. The editor would like to know how many pictures are in, or how many people and pictures are in that book, and where is it?
Well, you know, it's how many? I don't know how many pages are in a utility sketchbook. You know, those black hardcover ones.
Oh yeah.
I'm through 1.5 of them, and I've always threatened to maybe have the whole thing published and just kind of write a little bit about each person that's in there and what it was like to work with that person or who that person is. And someday maybe I will, but I don't know. When you have someone draw in your sketchbook, do you have ownership of that thing? Is someone going to come out of the woodwork and say, well, I didn't give you permission to print that. Now you owe me money. Like, it's tough. I can't know, but you know, maybe someday I'll print it. But you know, sometimes I feel like people who really cares about seeing those drawings, except for my peers. But I think maybe as a kind of way of making me remember these people, I might just do that. But it's fascinating. I think when people actually see it and they look through it, they pore over it. They'll look at it for an hour, going page by page, and they're like, "Oh, that's so and so," and I'll have a little story about that person. And I don't know. Do people in the world want to see that? Maybe.
Comment in the comments below if you want to see Chris's. What are we gonna call it? The big book of Chris's friends. Let's call it that. Color Foundations 09 would like to know, and this isn't exactly a question that's the best to ask to an artist, but I'll ask anyway. Were you always a good artist, or did that develop? And for those in the comments, what do you say it was a bad thing? Every artist thinks that they could get better.
I'm going to answer the cliche answer and say I'm not a good artist yet, because you never stop learning. You know, my brother just sent me a box of stuff from Michigan from when I moved out back in '91, and it had all my old sketchbooks in it. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see. It depressed me to no end. To like how in the world did John Kay even consider giving me a job? It was some terrible, terrible drawings in there, and it really depressed me. But looking at what I'm doing now, it's like, well, now I can see that I've matured as a cartoonist or whatever. So that's at least a positive. But I guarantee you, I can look at stuff next year that I did this year and think it was crap as well. But you know, you never stop learning. You never stop growing. If someone has told you they've learned how to draw and they figured it all out, they're lying to you. You know, you never ever stop, and it's life that kind of adds to it. As you go through it, things change in the way you draw. You know, you can see your stages. If you look back at the strata of your drawings, you could know it's like, well, that was my emo period because I was drawing with a thick black marker and wrote hate all over everything. You know, so it changes and it grows with you. And I think that if you stop growing as an artist, well, then that's kind of a tragedy.
Well, maybe that's where Lucy came from, is that dark period.
It's possible. You know, I was technically the black sheep of my family, but it was so innocuous that I was kind of more like the Heather Gray sheep of my family. Didn't even get anywhere near the black portion of it. So I guess I was, you know.
I guess the gray sheep, that's like halfway there.
Yeah.
Someone in the comments would like to know, and this might be a tough one. How would you describe your style personally?
A big lie. I'm just kidding. You know, I think I think my style is that I sometimes don't think I have a style, and everybody's like, "Oh, I could tell you're drawing a mile away." I'm like, "Please explain to me, because I wish I knew that I had a style." But it's difficult. I don't think I'm that good of a cartoonist, so for me to say that I have a style would be that maybe I'm aping somebody else. You know, obviously you can see a lot of influences from, you know, like Harvey Kurtzman or early comic strips in my work, but you know, to say it's a style is something that maybe I can't say that I have, but other people could maybe look at and critique in a way to say, this is your style, and explain it to me.
Well, if it's any closer to you, I think you're a good cartoonist. And
You're not.
you were good enough to be one of the, what is it, 9 now people who have been on this show, and that's practically a Guinness World Record thing right there.
Congratulations, 9 is my favorite number.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this is coattailing off it. If this isn't offensive, I guess. B-Specs would like to know, can someone get a job as a director if they can't draw? Because you kind of said that a few times.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to say yes, someone can, because I have seen it. There's a different process of becoming a director in animation back when we were doing what were called timing sheets.
Yeah.
So I've seen a few directors who don't draw, but you should be able to do little doodles in the timing sheets, but then take that path into becoming a director. Now, because we do a lot more shows in Flash and Harmony these days, timing sheets are becoming, going the way of the dodo bird, and only a few shows use timing sheets. And so there's less of that path that exists. And the newer path is from, storyboarding into directing is I think a more typical path these days. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm not saying that not knowing how to draw is okay when it comes to directing. I think that anybody who can convey an idea to another group of people and have that idea come out on the other end technically is a director.
That's pretty interesting. So we're getting to sort of the end of the interview. So I have 2 more questions, and this is one that I don't ask too much, but you've been in the industry for a while, so I'd like to know. When I asked Rob this question, he said the answer was computers. But to you personally, for someone who's been in the industry so long, what have you seen the biggest change in cartoons or animation in the last decade or so that you've been working in it?
Well, I can tell you it's not fashion. Well, we all dress the same over the years.
Oh yeah, Alex Hirsch wears a lot of plaid. I don't know too many other. Although Rebecca Sugar wears a lot of plaid. Is plaid the next coming of cartoon creator like apparel?
It could be. It could be because Kurt Cobain showed up at Funko one day that we're all copying him.
I can't see John Kay in flannel. I can't. No.
Well, look up online. You might be able to find it. So the question is the biggest change in animation over the 25 years?
Well, not exactly like one movie, but maybe the biggest change you've seen come to the industry.
What's interesting is as much as things change, they stay the same. I know it's kind of a cliche to say, but ultimately everyone is just trying to tell good stories. And yes, there are times when fantastic looking shows, I mean that in a fantasy based, come into favor, i.e. Adventure Time, and then they'll go away, and then the prime time style kind of comes into favor, and then that goes away, and then currently it feels like maybe we're shifting out of kind of snarky self-referential type cartoons into human-based, more relatable cartoons. So there, it changes like a roller coaster over the years, but the one thing that never changes in all of that is people just trying to tell good stories. So yeah, maybe the process of how we make them changes, but I think that what goes into making a cartoon will always stay the same.
And the final question I like to ask every time is, if there's someone out there watching this interview and they're a big Loud House fan or just an animation fan in general, what would you say is the #1 thing they got to do or would like to know to be able to get into the industry?
I think that what I've learned over the years, and it boils down to one word, and this could be applied to many different places in one's life, it boils down to one word, and that's listen. If you're not listening, you're not growing. And you never know where a good idea is going to come from, a good piece of advice is going to come from, or a good note even from an executive. If you're not listening, then nothing changes. And I feel like if I hadn't listened to the executive here who said, you should consider making the characters human, I guarantee you I wouldn't be sitting here doing this interview with you today, because I would have had a short cartoon about a bunch of rabbits that probably didn't go anywhere if I hadn't listened. So really, learn to listen. Ultimately, everything you do with every piece of information is up to you to do with it as you like. But if you didn't hear it in the first place, then it's not going to matter.
Well, you heard what Chris said. Listen, and thank you for listening to another episode of Cartoons vs. Cancer. Mr. Chris Savino, the creator of Loud House, was our guest today. If you just started the interview now, please check the link in the description box below for the donation link to the cause of the reason this show is for. My friend Madeline, please help raise money for her. The next episode of Loud House is tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? Is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, every night this week at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, every night this week, being the 18th of July now at 5 o'clock. Go watch it. Chris Savino, thank you so much for having us on. And the Cartoons vs. Cancer summer series will continue. This is going to be the last one for about a month because I'm going on a trip. But when it comes back, we're going to have great people like Maxwell Adams, Gary Trousdale, maybe Ralph Bakshi is going to reply to me, and Everett Peck, and all kinds of great people. So we can't wait to have you on. Chris, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
I just thank you, and yeah, please donate. I think what you're doing is fantastic.
Oh, well, I like your show too. So thank you very much, and we will see you guys later. Bye-bye.